So last week, as a matter of fact, the last 2 weeks, we've been discussing about the souls, the animalistic soul and the godly soul. We've learned the animalistic soul is selfish and really no vision. It's here and now. We take care of ourselves. The animal wants to just survive, do what it's got to do to survive, and keep on living. Now we're going to learn today something very, very interesting about the 4 elements that everything in the world and every person spiritually and physically is made of, which is earth, wind, fire, and water. And we're going to learn that the characteristics of a person, all the characteristics of a person stem from these 4 elements. Now we have to remember, and one of our main focuses is going to be today as follows. We have our iPhones, we have our laptops, we have our cars, we have everything we need to live. God made the world in a way that you need materialism to live, from clothes to food to everything else. Now the question, my friends, is who controls who? And that's going to be something we're going to speak about today. We're given all these things. Who controls who? You know, I was speaking to a group of kids about iPhones and smartphones. And I tried explaining to them that a smartphone never did anything bad. With all the internet, with all the everything, a smartphone never did anything bad. It's the person using the smartphone who decided how to use the smartphone. And therefore, my friends, again, the question is, are we controlling the smartphone? Are we controlling what we wear? Are we controlling what we eat? Or is everything around us controlling us? You know, it's the same thing. You can have an animal. How many of us have pets? It's beautiful to have pets. Question is, again, the animalistic soul. Who controls who? Does the animal control us, or do we control the animal? That is a question. You have many people that their lives revolve around their animals, and their animals control their whole lives. And you have, thank God, you have still people that are sane enough that know when to say, that is it. It's my life, and I will run my life because I am not an animal. I do have that intellect which my animal does not have. And I can make my decisions. Not my animal is going to make my decisions for me. By the way, that's the same thing as I said before with the animalistic soul. Are we controlling our animalistic soul, or is our animalistic soul controlling us? And we will go a little further inside, discussing the 4 elements. So we decided, Alter Rebbe said, the last thing we learned was that this animalistic soul is in the blood. This is our complete life force. It's in our blood. And we keep on going. And the Alter Rebbe says about Tanya, Umimena, and from this animal soul, this animalistic soul, which is, by the way, not, the animalistic soul is driven not by external things. It's actually a part of us. It's inside of us. So from this animalistic soul, ba'is kol midos, we get all our characteristics, the ra'is, the bad characteristics may arba yisodos ra'im shaba, from the negative characteristics that come from the negative side of the animal soul's 4 elements, as we will soon see what we are talking about. It's brought down in the Zohar and in Kabbalah, in our Jewish mysticism, that everything in the world, physically and not, whether it's an object, whether it's ourselves, can be used for good or bad. Everything has in it good, everything has in it bad. We have to make that difference when to use it, when not to use it. I'll give you an example. There are times, if you look in the book of Koheles, the great book of Koheles, it tells us that there is a time on this world for everything. There's a time to laugh, a time to cry. So there's a time to fight, a time for peace. There is a time for everything. A person is born with certain temperaments. He's born with such as kas, anger. Is anger a good thing or not? Well, when it's used as the proper time, obviously it is a good thing. When anger is used not at not such a proper time and not for a constructive purpose, it's not used for such a good thing. So you have in all these elements of fire, water, earth, and wind, everything can be used for bad and everything can be used for good. Such as Tahainu Ka'as V'Gaiva Misaid Ha'esh. You have here 2 characteristics of a person. One is kas, anger, and one is gaiva. Gaiva is haughtiness. A person is haughty. Which element does that come from? So the Alter Rebbe tells us it comes from the element of fire. Why is that? Because fire always rises up. Fire rises up. If you bump into someone who's very angry, anger always rises up. Same thing when a person is haughty, about gaiva as they call him, talking only about himself. I have accomplished, I have done, I am this, I am that. Everything is I, me, I. That's gaiva. That all stems from fire, the element of fire. Why? Because a person constantly wants to put himself higher and higher and higher. Now, if we go a little further in Tanya, we'll see that if a person really wants to be high because of his accomplishments, he doesn't have to talk too much about it. He automatically is looked up to because people know what he has accomplished. And if that person has to constantly remind people in order to get himself high and to make himself look bigger and higher, we have a little problem. That comes from fire. Fire is always going up. Now, fire, by the way, could be used for good or bad also, if you think about it. You can light a fire and, God forbid, burn something down. Or you can light a fire and heat up a room. Heat up yourself. Use the heat of the fire. Everyone uses the fireplace for the heat, right? If not used properly, God forbid, what could happen? The same thing with kas, with anger, the same thing with gaiva, with haughtiness. And this goes back to what we were talking about. Who or what controls who, or who controls what? Does our anger control us, or do we control our anger? Do we control our haughtiness, or does our haughtiness control us? That all comes from fire. And this is what Alter Rebbe is saying, the Baal Tanya is saying, that if you think that you are born with characteristics, and they're born inside of you. You're already born with them. But it's up to you how to develop them. It's up to us to control them. Once they start controlling us, we are in a bad path. And that is part of the animalistic soul controlling us. Again, do we control the animalistic soul, or does the animalistic soul control us? This is what the Baal Tanya is speaking about right now. Let's go a little further. There are more characteristics such as Haivas Hatanugim, wanting to have pleasure. Pleasure. Everybody likes pleasure, right? Who doesn't like pleasure? The desire to have pleasure comes from Misoid Hamayim, from the element of water. Interesting enough, the Baal Tanya tells us, because water cultivates all types of pleasures. It makes fruit and vegetables grow. By the way, if we come home after a long day at work, everyone loves to hit the hot tub, right? Yeah, you go into the hot tub. On one hand, you have a martini. On the other hand, you have a cigar, and you're all set. Why do you feel so comfortable? Why do you feel so good? It's water. Water cultivates pleasure. And that all comes from the element of water, all pleasures. Now, there are pleasures that are constructive. There are pleasures that are destructive. Not every pleasure that comes to our mind can we have. Not every pleasure that comes to our hand do we have an opportunity for. Doesn't mean we have to grab it. Who controls who? This is what it's all about. Right now, we're talking about self-control. Which soul controls the body? Is it the animalistic soul, or is my godly soul having to do and controlling my animalistic soul? We'll see later on in Tanya, giving you a heads up, that it says that a person consists of two things, two main parts of his body: his intellect, his seichel, his mayach, and his lave, his heart, which is his emotions. And yet it says what? That the Baal Tanya says that it's always got to be mayach sheilet ala lev, the intellect rule over the emotions, not lev sheilet ala mayach, not the heart, the emotions ruling over our intellect. When our emotions rule over intellect, we say whatever comes to our mind. We do whatever comes to us. We grab whatever is there without thinking, always using our emotions. By the way, that is what we call the nefesh habahamis, the animalistic soul. I will take what I want, when I want, my opportunity. It's my life, as they say. But it's really not our life. It's God's life. We're put down here on mission for God. And God gave us these two souls to fulfill our missions. One is an animalistic soul and one is a godly soul who goes through this constant battle inside of us. Who is controlling who? Do we have, or I should say, how much self-control do I really have? And once again, how do I know that? Well, to live as a Jew, if you think about it, living as a Jew is all self-control. Whether it has to do with kashrus, whether it has to do with the way we dress, with the way we work, when we work, how we do, what we do, everything has to do with self-control, which is self-refinement. That is what we accomplish when we refine ourselves, because in actuality, we're not refining only ourselves, we're refining the area around us, the people around us, making the world a better place to live. Let's go a little further. We have other characteristics. The hoilelus, v'leitzanus, v'hisparus, udvarim betelim, misaid haruach. There is something called silliness, mockery, boasting, and worthless discussion that all comes from the wind. Why wind? Because just like the wind, there's nothing to it. It's not tangible. So many things that we talk about, that we joke about, so many things, it's just not worth it. There's nothing to it. There's no sense. And once again, whatever we feel, is that what we have to say? Whatever comes to my mind or to my emotions, is that exactly what has to be said or no? Do I have to think a little bit before I speak? Think a little bit before I do? Think a little bit before I go on my iPhone, on my laptop, and figure out exactly what I'm going to do? As is what I'm about to do just a choice? I have two options. Am I adding anything to my life with what I'm about to do? When I say adding anything to my life, I'm talking about adding anything to a meaningful life. We can walk the walk and talk the talk all we want in Judaism, but it doesn't mean we're living the Judaism that we should be living. We're doing things because my father did it, my family did it, but are we really living it? Or are we just walking the walk and talking the talk? What's the difference? The difference is basically one word: internalization. Are we internalizing our Judaism? The only way, my friends, and I'm going to repeat this, and I'm willing to debate this with anybody, the only way that we can give over what Fiddler on the Roof called tradition to our children and to our grandchildren, okay, is to hand over the torch of Judaism. The only way to do that is by internalizing it inside of us. Once we internalize it inside of us, automatically it'll become internalized into our children and into our grandchildren. But if our children and grandchildren just see us walking the walk and talking the talk, but it's not internalized inside of us, what can we already expect from them? What can we expect from them? Their level of Judaism when they're going to be our age. As it is, Judaism gets watered down. More we live it, and by living it is not, again, it's not going through the motions. It's internalizing it, living it, eating it, and sleeping it. That is what and how we become role models to our future generation. You know, there are people that everything in life, they laugh it off. They laugh it off. I was once sitting with a student, and I called the student over, and we started schmoozing a little bit. And I asked him, what does he find so funny about everything? He's like the class clown, as they say. What's so funny? He says, Rabbi, don't you tell us all the time you have to serve God with joy? Simcha, you got to be besimcha. So I said, yes. Simcha doesn't only mean laughing. Simcha is a serious thing, believe it or not. Simcha, if we think about what simcha really means, simcha zachayim, joy of life, what simcha really is, it's a real serious thing. It's not a joke that we can laugh everything off. So he asked me how I look at life in simcha, and how I look at life. For him, laughing it off, I said, it's very simple. Laughing things off, that means you don't take things at all serious. You just don't take it serious. And the reason you don't take things serious is most people don't take life serious is because they look at things negatively. In order to cover up their negativity, they're always laughing. On the other hand, a person who's besimcha, if he looks at things on a positive note, that gives him the strength to always be besimcha, joy. In other words, when we're besimcha, when we do mitzvos with joy, when we live with joy, life has bumps to it. Life's a journey, ups and downs. But you know what? You go up the roller coaster, you're scared, but you're on that simcha journey. And that simcha journey is not always to be happy and just laugh it off. With positivity. I don't care what it is. I know people who are going through the worst situations, unfortunately. And they're always looking at the good in that situation. What can I still use this for the good? How can I still do something good? No matter what I have, no matter what I'm suffering, no matter what. Why? Because things always on a positive note. They tell me, but life could always be worse. No matter how bad we have it, God forbid, life could be worse. Not joy, not ibalus, which means silliness, joking, always mocking. I'm talking about real simcha. Let's go a little further. The next group of characteristics, which are atzlos va'atzvos, they come beside the offer. Atzlos is laziness. No one over here knows what that means, laziness, of course. We're all ready to move and go and do. No one here is lazy. And atzvos, depression. Laziness and depression that comes from the element of offer, dirt. Why? That's simple. When you're depressed, you're down and out. Just like the earth is down on the bottom, the same thing, laziness and on the bottom. My dear friends, this thing called depression is a terrible, terrible thing. It's something that we have to try our best to change our frame of minds and to stay away from it. Depression not necessarily is a sin. But what depression can bring us to do, it's terrible, terrible, terrible what it could bring us. There's the Tanya. These four elements, Mayim, Eish, Ruach, and Afar, water, fire, wind, and earth, all are characteristics that we are born with them. All come from the elements of these four concepts. But the issue here is they can be used for bad, and as we will see next week, Hashem, they can also be used for good. But then the concept again is, where did we start off from today? Who is controlling who? Is my anger controlling me, or am I controlling my anger? Am I getting angry at the right times or the wrong times? Yes, there is a time you have to be angry. There is a time you have to be heard. But who's controlling who? Is my animalistic soul, is what's controlling me? Is my animal literally controlling me? Is it controlling my whole life? Is it whatever comes to my mind, that's what I'm gonna do? That's so animalistic. But if we remind ourselves that we are also divine, we are also holy, we also are born with a spark of godliness inside of us. It doesn't matter where we were at. It doesn't matter where we're going. What does matter is our journey, the journey to get to our goal. The goal isn't so much what matters. And it doesn't matter where we're coming from anymore. But that journey, that fight, that struggle, which we all have those struggles between the animalistic soul and the godly soul. What should I do? Should I be more godly? Should I be more animalistic? How can I? What can I? That's the journey we're on. That's a journey that we're on from the day we're born till after 120 years. And we'll learn next week a little more about this journey and about the struggle. Meanwhile, I would like to wish you all a great night. It's good to see everyone.